I sat in the parking lot with the engine still running, watching the lights flicker on inside the house I used to call mine. Through the living room window, I saw them laughing. My ex-husband, his new wife, and my daughter wearing a sweater I hadn't bought. No one looked out. No one noticed. The invitation must have gotten lost, they'd say. But I knew better. I hadn't lost a seat at the table. I'd been erased from it. All right. Before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. Joe Barrett's heels echoed too sharply against the polished concrete as she walked past the reception desk on the 6th floor. She was 10 minutes late. Not fashionably, conspicuously. The kind of late that plants a flag. You weren't supposed to be here. Her calendar had been empty this morning, only when Danica sent a quiet Slack ping. Hey, not sure if you saw this strategy session. Your name was on the initial draft. Did she double-check? The invite wasn't there. Not even in spam. But she knew the room. She reached for the brushed steel handle and pulled the glass door open. Inside, the fluorescent lights washed everything in that clinical, too-white glow like a surgical theater. A long oval table stretched across the center, and at its head, Elliot Crane looked up mid-sentence. His frown twitched before settling back into his usual blank mask. "Didn't know you were on this one," he said, tapping his pen twice on the table. Joe held his gaze for a heartbeat too long. Neither did I. She pulled out the last open chair, one noticeably short on materials, and sat down, her notepad blank, her face unreadable. Across the room, she caught sight of someone she hadn't expected. Mila Crane was in the back row, behind the junior PMs, legs crossed, phone tucked face down in her lap, legal pad balanced precisely. She didn't belong to any strategy team. She didn't even work there, officially. But here she was, taking notes like she was chairing the damn thing. Joe's stomach tightened, not with nerves, but with confirmation. Elliot launched back into the meeting. "We've been discussing a fresh leadership direction going into Q2. There are redundancies in the current workflow and too much time lost in approval bottlenecks." His voice was smooth, practiced. "The executive team is evaluating structural realignments." There were nods around the table, some genuine, most performative. Joe kept her hands folded in her lap, wrists still, expression cool. She knew the tactic. Talk fast, frame it in jargon, flood the room with buzzwords until dissent felt inefficient. She'd run these meetings herself for over a decade. Mila scribbled something quickly. Joe watched her fingers. Meticulous, almost theatrical. Like she wanted to be seen writing. "Project scopes will shift. We want agility," Elliot continued. "We'll follow up with department-specific impact. Breakdowns." Joe didn't blink. She didn't ask a question. Didn't interrupt. That was what they expected. A flash of defensiveness. A protest they could weaponize as resistance. Instead, she leaned back. Let the silence hug her like armor. When the meeting ended, chairs scraped back, and people filed out with carefully neutral faces. No one met her eye directly, not even the ones who used to. Tara Wong lingered by the whiteboard, pretending to adjust a marker tray. Joe stepped past her, slow enough to make her look up. Tara's mouth opened like she might say something. A soft apology, maybe. But she didn't. Joe didn't stop walking. Out in the hallway, Joe pulled her phone from her coat pocket and opened the folder she'd started a few months ago. Insurance. Inside, screenshots of performance reviews, time-stamped messages, past projects with her name stripped out in the final decks. She tapped open her camera and took a photo of the meeting room door behind her. Through the glass, she could still see Mila sitting there alone, talking low to Elliot, who leaned in close. Joe saved the photo to the folder. Then she whispered to no one. "Good. Keep underestimating me." She turned toward the elevator. As the doors slid open, her phone buzzed. It was a Slack message from Danica. Just 2 words. They're moving fast. Joe stared at the screen as the elevator hummed downward, the kind of silence you hear before a storm. The next morning, Joe's office felt colder than usual. The HVAC always blasted too high in spring, but today the chill ran deeper, as if the building itself had turned against her. Her monitor blinked awake, screen flooding with unread messages. She scanned through the usual corporate noise, scheduling updates, new feature rollouts, a reminder about ergonomic keyboard training. Then she saw it. A forwarded email from Danica, subject line half redacted, like someone tried to bury it in the chain. FWD. Leadership transition. Internal draft. Joe's stomach stayed flat. She'd trained herself long ago not to react on the first read. She clicked it open. The thread unraveled like a slow leak. Elliot at the top, CC'd with 2 other execs and Tara from HR. His words were crisp, like a memo disguised as strategy. Time to clear legacy clutter before we lock Q2 deliverables. We need teams that align with our direction. Legacy clutter. He'd used that phrase before. Once, offhand, about old code modules. Now, apparently, about her. She scrolled further. Tara's nervous replies fluttered beneath his. Agree. We'll draft new role definitions. Reassess titles under performance alignment framework. HR speak for. We're cutting you. Just making it sound polite. Jo leaned back in her chair, eyes on the ceiling tiles. The whir of the ventilation system filled the silence. She wasn't angry. Not yet. Anger would make her sloppy. She was taking inventory. Of tone, of implication, of timing. Her fingers moved automatically, screenshot after screenshot, saved into her insurance folder. File names neat and numbered. 1 Yund email chainsaw Elliot. 2. HR confirm. 3. Attachments. She double-checked each image before dragging them into a nested folder dated that morning. Then she sat still for a moment, staring at her own reflection in the black glass of the monitor. She whispered, "You really think you're that clever?" The phone buzzed, a calendar reminder she didn't remember setting. Q2 strategy, follow-up. Optional attendance. Optional. That was new. Jo exhaled through her nose, calm and steady, then opened her personal calendar. One deliberate click. New event. Personal day. She typed a single note in the description. Invest in quiet moves. She hit save. As she gathered her things, her eyes caught a glint on her second monitor. Her LinkedIn feed auto-refreshing in the background. She rarely checked it, but one post floated to the top with far too many likes to ignore. Mila Crane. Exciting changes ahead. Growth requires courage. Proud to support bold new directions. There was a photo. A filtered shot of the office skyline, captioned with a gold-tinged "Ich leadership matters." Jo's hand hovered over her mouse. Her expression didn't shift, but something in her chest hardened. The kind of emotion that doesn't flare, it calcifies. She clicked on Mila's profile. The bio was newly updated. Private investor. Strategic advisor to leadership teams. So Mila wanted to be public now. Fine. Jo closed the browser, shut the laptop, and slipped her phone into her coat pocket. The elevator ride down was slow, and she used it to breathe. Not meditate, not calm herself, just center. The building hummed softly around her. Her reflection in the metal door looked steady, distant. She walked past the reception desk, nodding at the security guard who always smiled too brightly. Outside, Chicago's air was wet and heavy, the river wind cutting through her coat. She stopped at the corner near the cafe where she sometimes worked through lunch. Her phone buzzed again. Another Slack ping from Danica. "Sorry, didn't mean to freak you out yesterday. Just thought you should see." Jo typed back, "You did the right thing." Then paused. Deleted it. Typed instead, "Appreciate it." She pocketed the phone and stepped into the cafe. The barista looked up. The usual, Joe? She nodded. Make it to go. As she waited, she opened her phone one last time, flipped to the folder labeled Insurance, and scrolled through the fresh screenshots. Proof stacked neatly like cards, ready to play. Then her thumb hovered over one image, the last one. The timestamp caught her attention. It wasn't when she'd taken it. It was later. Someone had accessed the thread again. Her eyes narrowed. Someone inside had forwarded it one more time, after Danica. And this time, the subject line had changed. Legacy Review. Confidential. The cup hit the counter behind her. Medium latte for Joe. She turned, calm smile in place, heart pacing steady. She took the cup and walked out into the wind, eyes sharp, already planning what would come next. Steam curled around Joe's face as she leaned over the bowl, the scent of anise and charred scallion rising from the broth like something sacred. The post spot was half hidden, just east of the Wabash Bridge, down a flight of cement stairs barely marked by a peeling decal on the glass door. She used to come here with Reggie back when they were coworkers, before he took the package and walked away smiling. Now he was already seated in the corner booth, black coat folded neatly beside him, nursing a lime soda like he had all the time in the world. Damn, he said, grinning as she slid into the seat across from him. Still don't know how you find these places. Smells like a secret. Joe gave a small smile, but didn't banter. Not today. Reggie's grin faded, replaced by the alert stillness she remembered from late-night product scrums. The way he'd lean in when things were about to break. You didn't call for lunch because you missed me. She reached into her coat pocket, pulled out her phone, and set it face up between them. The screen showed an open email thread. No scrolling. Just the line near the top. Time to clear legacy clutter. Reggie's eyes didn't narrow, didn't widen. He just let out a low whistle and sat back against the red vinyl booth. Damn, Elliot's really going for it, huh? Joe tapped the phone and flipped to the next screenshot. And HR's on board. They've already drafted title reassessments. It's clean on paper. Reggie exhaled slowly, which makes it dirty in real life. She gave the smallest nod. They're hoping I resign. Make it easy. No story. He leaned forward again, elbows on the table. You gonna? Joe looked down at her broth. A slice of brisket floated up like a question. She didn't answer it. Instead, she said, Why do you think Mila was at that meeting? Reggie blinked once, then chuckled. That's the real question, isn't it? He rubbed a hand over his jaw. I've been hearing things. Some chatter from the tech angel group I sit with. Someone, female, aggressive, tied to a strategic pivot, has been sniffing around your company's books, asking about access, votes, equity. Joe looked up at that. Equity? Reggie gave a slow, knowing nod. Word is they're prepping for a control push. Quietly. They want leverage before the next funding cycle. Why now? Because you're in the way. You're respected, consistent, legacy. And they don't want legacy. They want obedience. Joe stared at him. So what would you do? He sipped his drink. Want to make them uncomfortable? She smiled slightly. Define uncomfortable. Reggie leaned in, voice low. This company isn't publicly traded yet. Still private, which means there's no public ledger of shareholders, and there's a clause buried in the articles. A few of us noticed it back in the early growth days, but no one ever touched it. Joe raised an eyebrow. You can buy in, he said, legally, quietly, through a third-party structure, if you know where to look. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she pulled her spoon through the broth, let it ripple across the surface. The silence stretched, but it wasn't empty. It was full of shape, like something taking form behind her eyes. Reggie watched her for a beat. Then he added, They think you're cornered. If you flip the board on them, you'd be a ghost in the machine. She finally looked up. Who handles the paperwork? He smirked. You remember Greg Steele? Joe's face didn't change, but something in her pulse kicked up. Just a little. Still charges enough to make CEOs sweat, Reggie added. But he's clean. And careful. The server appeared with the check, placing it gently on the table between them. Reggie reached for it. Joe didn't stop him. As they stood, he glanced at her with a half grin. You always were better at chess than checkers. Outside, the wind had picked up, harsh now, no longer just autumn biting. She turned up her collar and stepped back toward the river, where the skyline shimmered cold and reflective across the water. Her phone buzzed again. Danica. Just a link this time. A post from Mila. Newly uploaded. Grateful for clean transitions. Strong futures require stronger leadership. Strategic shift. Shah. Ownership mindset. Joe read it twice. Then tapped and held the screen. Save to. Insurance. Her thumb hovered over her contacts. Then she started typing. Greg Steele. Corporate attorney. Greg Steele's office didn't look like the kind of place you walked into unless you had something to bury or something to win. The legal building sat between a minimalist jewelry boutique and a boutique espresso lab on LaSalle. Polished, gray, almost clinical. The kind of spot where no one asked questions at the front desk because they already knew the answers. Joe stepped off the elevator at the 18th floor, the quiet ding swallowed by the thick carpeting. Greg's office was at the end of a narrow hallway lined with frosted glass panels. On the door, the gold letters simply read, Steele and Associates. No slogan, no branding, just finality. She knocked once and pushed in. Greg didn't bother standing. He looked exactly the same as she remembered. Silver hair sharp against a black suit, not a wrinkle in sight, eyes like cold water. Joe Barrett, he said without smiling. That name still gets attention in a room. She sat down without responding. He folded his hands. Reggie said you'd call. Didn't say you'd move this fast. I don't have time for slow, she replied. Greg nodded like he respected that. He turned his monitor toward her and tapped a file open. Your company's bylaws are still sitting on version 1.2. Never updated the silent investment clause. Most founders assume it'll never be invoked. Joe leaned forward. Can it be done quietly? Yes. Cleanly, too. As long as the funding source is independent and non-conflicting, and the board's stake dilution cap hasn't been triggered, which it hasn't, then yes, it'll pass. She looked at the monitor, then back at Greg. What's the threshold to raise a voice in shareholder review? He clicked once. 2%. Her eyes didn't flicker. I want 3. Greg gave the smallest smirk. Strategic. That gives you insulation if they try to flush you out. He spun a leather folder around toward her. Sign here, here. And once more beside the silent investor disclosure. Joe didn't even blink at the paperwork. The capital had already been prepped through a private holding account Reggie helped her unlock. Years of performance bonuses and unspent equity awards, bundled quietly in case the day ever came. Apparently, the day had come. She signed. Greg stood, extended a firm hand. You'll get confirmation by end of week. You'll be on the books before they know you're even in the room. Joe stood too, her grip precise. Good. I prefer to watch them speak before they know I can vote. He raised an eyebrow. You always had that edge. She paused at the door. No, she said. Now I do. By Friday evening, it was done. The confirmation came through just after 6 p.m. in a clean, minimalist email with an encrypted PDF attached. Subject line, Shareholder confirmation, Class B, 3.00%. Joe opened it, skim the legal phrasing, and quietly move the file to a separate folder she'd labeled Foundations. Then she shut her laptop. She sat alone in a high-back armchair in her apartment, the city skyline wide and lit behind her. A glass of Tempranillo in one hand, her phone in the other. The familiar blue and white glow of LinkedIn lit up the screen again. Mila Crane had posted another photo. This time, it was the full executive team, Elliot in front, hand on Tara's shoulder like some kind of benevolent puppeteer. Mila stood just behind him, her arms folded, chin up, smug and polished in a steel gray blazer. The caption read, "Strong owners only. The future deserves clarity." Hashtags trailed like a tailpipe. Shastir leadership shift. Caught in chapter sa. Haksh ownership matters. Jo sipped her wine, slow and even. She didn't comment, didn't like it, just tapped and saved the image. Then she opened her gallery and flipped to a different photo. One Danica had taken months ago at the last team offsite. It was Jo at a whiteboard, drawing out a system integration plan, sleeves rolled, hair up, team clustered close. None of those people were in Mila's photo. Jo looked at them side by side, the posed future and the forgotten past, and smiled faintly. Her phone buzzed again. Greg Steele. Filed. Sealed. Recorded. You're in. Welcome to the other side. Jo locked her screen. The city stretched before her, full of glitter and glass and people who still thought she was standing on the outside looking in. They had no idea she was already holding the keys. The HR office smelled like lemon-scented disinfectant and fear. Jo noticed it the second she stepped inside. That overly sanitized chill, the kind that masked nerves more than germs. Tara Wong stood just inside the doorway, hands clasped at her waist like she didn't know what to do with them. She forced a smile, all teeth and strain. "Hey, Jo. Thanks for coming on short notice." Jo stepped inside without responding. "You scheduled it. I showed up." Tara's eyes flicked downward. "Right. Have a seat." The small conference table was already set. One chair on one side, two on the other. The second was filled a moment later just as Jo sat down. Elliot Crane walked in like he owned oxygen. No folder, no laptop. Just that casual arrogance draped over him like a tailored coat. "Jo," he said, voice warm and false, like a pastor greeting a sinner before the sermon. "Appreciate you making time. We just wanted to—" He gestured vaguely between himself and Tara. "Check in. Get aligned as we move toward Q2. Jo tilted her head slightly. "Check-ins usually come with agenda invites." Elliot's smile twitched. "Well, this is more of a performance touchpoint. Nothing formal. We're just trying to make sure everyone's in the right seat for where the company's headed." There it was. Polite decapitation. Tara nodded too quickly, flipping open a printed document with shaking fingers. "We've gathered some notes, feedback from recent project cycles. A few concerns were raised about communication style and decision-making speed. Nothing alarming, just areas for reevaluation." Jo didn't speak. She didn't flinch. She let them squirm in their own prepared script, the kind written by people who had already decided what would happen next. Elliot leaned in, forearms on the table, voice dropping into mock empathy. "We thought it made sense to consider a rescope of your role. Less direct ownership, more advisory. You'd still be critical to the team." Jo studied him. "Just not on it." Elliot's smile froze. "That's not how I'd put it." She reached slowly into her bag. Her movements were calm, deliberate. No rush, no drama. She pulled out a slim leather folder and placed it on the table between them. Neither moved to touch it. Jo opened it herself and slid a single document forward, face up. A printed and notarized copy of her shareholder acquisition. Signed, sealed, time-stamped. For a moment, no one spoke. Tara blinked, mouth parting like a breath caught in her throat. She leaned in, lips silently reading the line that mattered. Then came the whisper, thin and disbelieving. Is this active? Joe looked at her, not unkindly, but without softness. She nodded once. Elliot's jaw worked, the mask starting to crack just behind his polished composure. Joe, why wouldn't you bring this to me? This kind of move. She cut him off. Not with words, just by tapping the clause at the bottom of the document. Tara leaned in again, reading aloud now, voice smaller with each word. Any attempt to alter, suspend, or reassign the title or responsibilities of a vested shareholder requires a formal review under the Class B governance clause. Jo sat back, folding her hands in her lap. Which means you can't demote me unless you're ready to call a full shareholder meeting, with minutes, with recorded votes. Silence. Elliot's expression flickered through a half-dozen strategies. Denial, charm, threat. Before landing on nothing. Just stunned stillness. Tara looked at the document like it was radioactive. No one flagged this. Legal didn't... Because they don't know, Joe said, voice low. And they won't. Unless someone tries to push the issue. Elliot stood slowly, hands flat on the table. You've been planning this. Joe looked up at him, eyes steady. No, I've been surviving this. Planning came later. She stood too, picking up the folder and sliding it back into her bag with practiced calm. If there's no formal action, I assume this meeting is over. Tara didn't speak. Elliot didn't stop her. Joe walked out with the silence trailing behind her like a cracked dam just starting to leak. Out in the hallway, she didn't smile. Not yet. But her breath came easier. She took out her phone. New note. HR attempt number 1. Blocked via shareholder clause. Expect retaliation. Stay 5 moves ahead. The PDF came through at 8:07 a.m. sharp. Joe was already dressed. Navy slacks, fitted white blouse, hair pinned tight. She sat at her kitchen table with a black coffee cooling beside her, the early light slicing across the screen of her laptop like a blade. From Gregory Steele. Subject: Shareholder Protections. Class B excerpt. Attachment: Policy Bar 1. Shareholder triggers.pdf. She opened the file and read, slowly, carefully, line by line. The clause was buried in section 7.4.2, just where Greg said it would be. Any internal restructuring, title reassignment, or functional reclassification affecting a Class B shareholder must be reviewed by the Shareholder Oversight Committee. Failure to observe this clause constitutes material breach of fiduciary procedure. Jo exhaled through her nose, folded the screen shut, and finished her coffee. By 9:32 a.m., her inbox was buzzing. Subject: Clarification regarding yesterday's meeting from Elliot Crane to Joe Barrett. Joe. Just wanted to follow up on our conversation yesterday. To be clear, nothing discussed in that meeting was finalized. It was part of an exploratory review of team structure ahead of you. Q. No actions have been taken. Let me know if you'd like to sit down again. Best, Elliot. She stared at it for a full 30 seconds, then clicked reply. Elliot. Per our meeting at 3:12 p.m. yesterday in HR Conference Room A, both you and Tara presented a draft document detailing performance concerns and recommended rescoping of my current role. You also used the phrase, less direct ownership, and Tara cited specific feedback aligned with title reassignment. For reference, I've attached to the calendar invite, time-stamped Slack messages from Tara confirming the subject matter, and audio notes from the call, should you need them. As of today, I consider the matter closed. Best, Joshi hit send, then attached Greg's PDF to a separate folder in her insurance archive titled Formal Protections. At 11:16 a.m., the weekly HR status call began. Joe joined from a private phone booth tucked inside the co-working lounge on 14, the kind with noise-canceling walls and a soft orange glow meant to reduce tension. Tara's voice came through first. We'll begin with HR impact projections for departmental reviews. Joe listened. Not for content, for tone. Tara sounded strained, over-rehearsed, the way someone talks when they're tiptoeing across a trap they forgot they helped build. Midway through the call, Elliot cut in. Before we go further, I want to make sure we're all aligned. Last week's exploratory discussions around project ownership were misinterpreted. That was never meant to signal any formal performance action. Jo unmuted herself. Actually, she said calmly, what was presented to me was actionable enough to warrant legal review. A pause. Jo continued, voice flat, precise. And since we're all aligned now, I've uploaded the governing clause from the shareholder agreement to the shared drive, section 7.4.2. You'll want to review that before initiating any further exploratory conversations. Silence cracked through the call like a whip. Then came the sound of a chair scraping back. Tara? Elliot asked, voice tight. But Tara didn't respond. Instead, a soft chime echoed through the call. Tara Wong has left the meeting. Jo stayed on another 10 seconds, then clicked, leave herself. She stepped out of the phone booth, smoothed her blouse, and walked toward the kitchenette. The co-working floor buzzed with quiet meetings, soft clicks of keyboards, the low hum of business as usual. And then, Mila. Leaning against the break room counter, espresso in hand, eyes locked onto Jo with a frozen smile that didn't quite reach her face. You've been busy, Mila said softly. Jo poured water into her mug without looking over. Staying informed. You should talk to Elliot before this gets rigid. Jo finally turned, held her gaze. If anyone's rigid, it's your assumptions. Mila blinked, just once, then walked off, heels sharp against tile. Back at her desk, Slack blinked open with a new message. Danica R. Power move. Jo typed back. Stay close. Danica replied with a single emoji. Jo closed her laptop slowly, the hum of the room thinning out around her. The elevator rose slow and silent toward the top floor, a glass-sided capsule climbing through steel and shadow. Jo stood alone inside, her reflection a sharp silhouette against the blur of downtown. Hair pinned back, dark gray suit, leather folio tucked under one arm. She looked like a woman going to war with paperwork. The boardroom was glass on 3 sides, high above Lake Street. All hard lines, recessed lights, and a cold modernity meant to intimidate. Jo didn't blink. 3 members were already seated when she entered. Angela Lynn, finance chair, sharp-eyed, colder than any spreadsheet she ever approved. Malcolm Reyes, Midwestern polite, ex-operations, trusted Jo since the second quarter of the merger. Layla Grant, legal liaison, quiet, incisive, hated Elliot but never said it out loud. Reggie Bloom was there too. Back of the room, relaxed posture, tablet in hand. No formal vote, not yet. But presence meant alignment. And everyone in that room knew what his alignment meant. Elliot Crane stood at the far end of the table, flipping through a manila folder like it mattered. Mila wasn't present, not in the room, not even dialed in. That told Jo everything. He was rattled enough to want the optics of control, but not confident enough to risk her mouth in the room. Jo took her seat at the table's opposite end, set her folio down, and looked up. I appreciate you taking the time, she said. I'll be brief. Angela gave a nod that meant, you have 5 minutes. Impress me. Jo opened the folder. What's being circulated internally as exploratory restructuring has, in fact, crossed every legal and procedural boundary laid out in our Class B governance policies. She laid out the first document, a printout of Elliot's email, the subject line circled in red. Then the next, HR notes, date stamped and signed by Tara before she ghosted the building. She slid each page across the table in sequence, not rushing, not overplaying. It was a quiet storm. By the time she reached the last page, Greg Steele's legal opinion, The room was still. Jo didn't raise her voice once. Didn't need to. Malcolm cleared his throat first. This is all verified? Reggie leaned forward from his chair in the back. I reviewed it. So did legal. Jo has standing. Angela turned to Elliot, arching a brow. Do you dispute any part of this? Elliot straightened, palms flat on the table. There's been a mischaracterization of intent. Nothing was implemented. We were exploring transitions. Nothing actionable. Jo's expression didn't shift. She flipped over the final page and tapped the margin. Your exploration included printed reassignment recommendations and a calendar-marked HR session, which, per clause 7.42, constitutes an attempted alteration of shareholder title. Elliot's jaw clenched. That clause was never intended for active use. It was precautionary. And now it's precedent, Jo said evenly. The room was dead quiet. Layla finally leaned forward, her tone surgical. So what are you asking, Jo? Jo folded her hands. Nothing. She paused. I'm not asking for action. I'm confirming that what was attempted won't happen again without consequence. Angela looked to the others. Then I propose we enter it into record as reviewed. No action taken at this time. Malcolm nodded. So did Layla. Reggie didn't need to say anything. His silence was already a flag on the field. Elliot's pen tapped once on the table, a nervous tick he hadn't shown since the last acquisition review. The board began gathering their things. Chairs slid back, papers rustled. The storm had passed, but the air hadn't cleared. Not yet. Jo stood, folio under one arm, and turned toward the door. As she passed Reggie, he murmured just loud enough for her to hear. Hell of a first move. Jo didn't break stride. But just before she pushed open the glass door, she heard Elliot's voice. Lower now, tight with something too bitter to hide. She's going to burn the whole damn thing down. And Layla, flatly. Then maybe next time, read the policy before lighting the match. The 10 a.m. strategy sync used to be Elliot's stage. Every week he'd commandeer the whiteboard, toss out empty buzzwords like grenades, and suck all the air from the room. But this week, he wasn't even on the invite. Jo Barrett walked in 5 minutes early, calm, centered, black notebook in hand. She chose the head seat, not out of ego, but clarity. The rest of the room filled slowly, familiar faces settling in with cautious glances. Some hadn't made eye contact with her since the HR ambush. Today, they did. Danica slid into her seat with a tablet under one arm and a quiet confidence in her posture. She nodded once toward Jo. Jo returned it. No words needed. Jo opened the meeting like she had 1,000 others. No theatrics. Just precision. Let's ground quickly, she said. Danica, you're up. Danica stood, not timid, not flashy, just ready. She cast the presentation to the screen behind them. Over the last 2 quarters, we've averaged a 16% delay between feature build and client handoff. That lag is avoidable. She clicked to the next slide. I've mapped a new dev-to-ops deployment process. It collapses the QA feedback loop, adds flexibility for real-time user input, and keeps our compliance window intact. Heads nodded, even the ones that used to defer to Elliot. Danica kept going. I'm also recommending we pilot dual-track sprints using a shared logic framework. Less waste, more agility. She paused, then added, and we do it without waiting for cross-department sign-off. Just us. Our team. There it was. The kind of bold proposal that used to get people pulled into side rooms after meetings. Jo spoke for the first time since Danica started. I support it. Silence followed. Not shocked silence. Expectant. Like everyone was waiting for the blowback. And then it came. From the back. Mila Crane had slid in late, unannounced, and now leaned back in her chair like she'd been there the whole time. One stiletto heel dangled off her crossed knee, the picture of strategic disruption. She smiled. Do we even need this role anymore? The air thinned. Mila tilted her head toward Joe, voice syrupy. If we're streamlining strategy, isn't project leadership a little legacy? Joe didn't flinch, didn't raise her voice. She reached into her notebook, turned to a flagged page, and looked directly at Mila. The board reviewed my scope last week. Fully approved. She slid the notebook across the table, letting the page face up. The line highlighted in green. Shareholder lead. Operational oversight to remain intact. Strategic authority maintained. The room was dead silent. Mila's smile faltered. Of course, she said, tone sharpening slightly. I'm sure Elliot will want to. Joe didn't let her finish. Elliot wasn't on the boardroom schedule. Mila's eyes narrowed just slightly, a crack in her gloss. Joe turned back to the group like Mila had never spoken. Danica, prepare a 2-week pilot. I want metrics in place by Thursday. Danica gave the tiniest grin. Already started. The meeting wrapped 15 minutes early. No overtalking, no derailment, just clean execution. As people packed up, a few gave Joe the briefest nods, gratitude disguised as professionalism. Danica lingered a half step behind everyone, but Joe shook her head. Not here. Not now. Later. Back at her desk, Joe opened a blank email. Subject, Q2 planning sync, minutes attached to, board distribution list, private attachments, meeting cache, transcript.pdf, roadmap Danica ta, pilot draft.pptx. No commentary. Just facts. Documentation, precise and direct. She clicked send, then she reopened her notebook and added a new line in her own scrawl. Mila is testing boundaries. She just hit one. As Joe closed her laptop, she noticed the screen's reflection. Mila, across the co-working floor, standing at the coffee station, watching. Not pretending anymore. It arrived in her inbox just after midnight. Subject, motion to restructure. Departmental realignment vote from Elliot Crane to shareholder distribution list. Joe read it in bed, laptop perched on a tray, her room lit only by the bluish-gray spill of city lights through the window. The email was dressed in corporate neutrality. Efficiency, clarity of function, evolving business needs. But she knew the language. This wasn't a restructure. It was a removal. They weren't cutting a department. They were trying to sever her reach. She copied the text, annotated it, highlighted where it violated internal policy about shareholder-led functional oversight. Then she opened a new draft. Subject, shareholder response, clarification on Class B governance. 2. All minor shareholders, BCC. Team, as a Class B shareholder with documented board-reviewed scope, I'm offering clarity ahead of the proposed vote. The current structure of product strategy is not only revenue positive, but also protected under Section 7.4.2. Attempts to restructure without procedural compliance present legal and fiduciary risks. Attached, financial performance, legal opinion, G. Steele, HR attrition rates, post Q1 restructure transparency matters, Joe Barrett. She clicked send. It wasn't fire, it was water. Cold, heavy, inevitable. The shareholder vote was scheduled for 11 a.m., held virtually via a secure platform. Reggie had sent her a text the night before. I'm voting no. You've already won. Let them learn it the hard way. Joe joined the call 5 minutes early, camera off. She watched the names pop in one by one. Angela Lynn, Malcolm Reyes, Layla Grant, Reggie, Elliot, a few minor shareholders, developers who'd been given fractional equity during the last retention push. The moderator opened the session. The motion on the table is to restructure the product strategy division, consolidating responsibilities into operations and client solutions. Voting opens now. Jo didn't speak. She didn't need to. Votes ticked in. Reggie. No. Malcolm. No Layla. No Angela. Abstain 1 minor shareholder. No 2. No response. Elliot voted last. Yes. Final tally. Motion fails. There was no posturing this time. Just digital silence. Elliot didn't speak, but his name hovered on screen a second too long, as if he was trying to decide whether to stay or vanish. He chose vanish. Logged out. Jo sat back in her chair. Not smiling. Measured. Her phone buzzed. Subject: farewell and thank you from Tara Wong to HR and Internal Leadership. Jo opened it. After careful reflection, I've chosen to resign from my position as Director of HR. I've appreciated my time here, but no longer feel aligned with the direction being taken. Effective immediately. Below the signature line, no flourish, no quote. Just white space. Jo didn't forward it. She didn't have to. Everyone who needed to see it already had. She stood, stretched, walked to the break room to pour herself a cup of coffee. On her way back, she passed Mila, who was mid-conversation with someone from compliance. Mila's smile cracked when she saw her. Jo nodded politely, then kept walking. Back at her desk, she opened Slack. Danica had left a single emoji in her direct messages. She typed back. Clean shot. Danica replied, they won't try that again. Jo was about to close her laptop when her phone rang. Not a buzz, a full ring. Greg Steele. She answered immediately. Jo, he said, voice clipped. We have a situation. She didn't move. Go ahead. Someone submitted a transfer authorization to the board registrar this morning, claimed to be acting on your behalf, trying to move your 3% stake into a holding company based in Delaware. She didn't blink. I didn't authorize anything. I know. I flagged it before processing. Silence. Then, forged? She asked. Badly, but bold. Whoever did it had partial access to your onboarding credentials, and they timed it for right after the vote, while you'd be distracted. Jo's pulse dropped a beat. Not panic, focus. Do we know where it came from? We're pulling the IP now, Greg said. But you might want to start looking at who had motive to erase you, not just from org charts. Jo stared at her screen. Her hand hovered over her mouse but didn't move. Greg moved fast. By 9 a.m., legal had filed a preliminary notice of internal investigation with the board. By 9:15, company IT was deep inside access logs and credential histories. By 10:03, they had their answer. Jo watched the admin thread unfold on a secure Slack channel Greg had looped her into. She didn't type. She didn't need to. It. Michael DeVore. Confirm the login came from an office device. MacBook serial ending in 1FB3. Registered to Crane. Mila logged in via Floor 14 proxy at 11:42 a.m. yesterday. Used cached credential tokens tied to Joe Barrett's onboarding session. No MFA prompt. She bypassed with admin override. Video review pending. Jo didn't react. She just sat straighter. Her breath leveled out, precise. By 11:15, a calendar invite landed in her inbox. Subject: Emergency Board Session. Confidential location. Executive Conference. Floor 18. She arrived 10 minutes early. Reggie was already there, sipping tea like he hadn't just helped trigger corporate war. You're not going to like this part, he said without looking up. Jo closed the door behind her. That depends on how much I get to watch. Angela Lynn entered next, face unreadable. Then Layla, silent as always but radiating heat. Elliot came in last. No folder, no laptop, just his hands shoved deep in his pockets, like maybe he could hide inside them. Mila was absent. The general counsel, new, sharp, and trying too hard to stay neutral, cleared her throat. We're here to address a potential breach of internal security protocol related to unauthorized equity transfer. She turned to Joe. Ms. Barrett, would you like to speak first? Joe opened her folder and slid a single sheet forward. Her statement. Signed and time-stamped. She didn't read it aloud. The facts spoke for themselves. Angela took it. Read in silence. Her fingers tapped once against the edge. And legal confirms your credentials were compromised? Greg, dialed in on video, nodded. Used without consent. System access was rerouted via an executive-level override available only to admin laptops registered through senior staff. One of which, he glanced down at something on his screen, is assigned to Mila Crane. Layla looked at Elliot. Is she here? Elliot cleared his throat. She's consulting counsel before attending. Angela cut him off. Why does she need counsel if it was a mistake? She didn't know, Elliot said, too fast. I mean, she might have left the laptop unattended. It's a shared environment. Someone else could have. Joe finally spoke. You're defending her. It wasn't a question, it was an observation. Elliot's mouth opened, closed. We're partners. I trust her. Layla's eyes narrowed. Then maybe you should have advised her not to impersonate a shareholder. Greg's voice came through again, flat and fatal. The forged paperwork used language pulled directly from internal Class B forms. That document wasn't guessed. It was studied. Elliot sat down slowly like he was hoping the chair would make him disappear. Angela folded her hands. Motion to suspend Mila Crane pending further review of this incident and to revoke executive-level device access until cleared by legal. Seconded, said Malcolm. Passed, Layla said, before anyone even took a vote. Elliot swallowed hard. This will look bad externally if we don't control the narrative. No one's looking at you anymore, Angela snapped. They're looking at her. And now, probably you. Joe leaned back. Control what you want. Just don't confuse the narrative with the facts. Greg spoke once more. Joe, we can escalate this further. Press for removal. Based on tampering, shareholder impersonation, even conspiracy if it links. Everyone turned toward her. Joe was quiet for a moment, not because she didn't have an answer, but because she understood the weight of choosing when to swing and when to watch. I'm not here for drama, she said calmly. I'm here for accountability. Reggie gave a small nod, almost approving. As the meeting adjourned, Elliot stood slowly, looking not at Joe, but toward the glass windows, where the skyline looked like it might cut him. Joe packed her folder without a word. As she left the room, Layla followed. Do you want her gone? She asked quietly when they reached the hall. Joe didn't stop walking. I want her irrelevant. The box on her desk wasn't hers. Joe had arrived early like always, expecting the familiar. Her glass-walled cube tucked just beyond the strategy bullpen, the one with the peeling whiteboard calendar she never updated, and the old mug with Agile Ain't Free, printed in faded blue. But the elevator opened on 17, not 14. No one had told her anything, no email, no memo. Just a quiet change in badge access and a nudge from facilities. Your keycard's been reassigned. New desk, 1702. She stepped through the new door and there it was. An office that wasn't decorated, just designed. Wide desk, warm wood, wall-mounted display, frosted glass for privacy, 2 chairs for visitors, 1 high-backed leather one for her. The nameplate on the door was temporary. J. Barrett, Interim Strategy Lead. Interim, she said aloud, voice flat. Cute. She circled the desk. Everything had already been moved. Her files, her encrypted drive, her calendar dry erase board now polished and mounted behind her chair like it had always belonged there. Then she saw the plant. a small snake plant in a matte black ceramic pot. Beside it, a note card, thick and crisp. Always better at strategy. R. She smiled, just a little. 15 minutes later, Danica knocked lightly on the glass and stepped inside. She was carrying a small paper bag and a box of tea. "No one else brought anything," she said, shrugging. "But I know you hate the kitchen coffee, so—" Joe opened the bag. A sleek French press and a half-pound of roasted beans from a cafe near the river. She raised an eyebrow. Danica smiled. "You're not gonna have time to go out anymore. Thought I'd save you the steps?" Joe set the bag down beside the plant. "You're good at reading rooms." "I learned from the best," Danica said, then added, "Also, everyone knows." Joe looked up. "About the office?" "About everything." Danica's voice lowered. "The vote, the forgery, HR, even the laptop logs." Joe leaned back in the chair. "And?" Danica shrugged. "Some people are watching to see if you fall. But most of us, we're done with Elliot's way of doing things." Joe didn't answer. She didn't need to. Later that day, at the team all hands, Elliot took his usual seat off to the side of the main stage. But he didn't speak. He didn't welcome the team, didn't introduce the presenters, didn't say anything at all. Joe stood at the center, clicking through slides like it was any other quarter. She talked performance metrics, dev cycle wins, client retention. She introduced 2 junior team leads stepping up to pilot the new cross-function tracks. Every time she spoke, Elliot stared at the floor. Afterward, he ducked out before the Q&A. She didn't bother watching him go. Back upstairs, Joe returned to her office to find a single-line email from compliance. Subject: credential audit, complete body, user, M. Crane, permissions revoked, account closed, device flagged, return to legal, no reinstatement pending. Just like that. Mila was gone, no press release, no lunch, no goodbye post. Joe let the message sit open on her screen. Then she hit archive. She turned to the whiteboard behind her and uncapped a marker. Under Q3 prep, she wrote 2 bullet points. Team shadowing program revamp junior mentorship tracks. Then, after a long pause, she added a third. COO succession protocol. A quiet knock interrupted her thoughts. It was Layla. She didn't step inside, just leaned into the doorway. "Board's calling a performance review on Elliot. Officially." Joe didn't turn around. "I thought they already had their answer." Layla smiled faintly. "Now it'll be in writing." She left without saying more. Joe recapped the marker, sat down, looked at her inbox again. A new message blinked at the top. Subject: lunch invite, Reggie. "Bring the plant, I'll bring the wine, you bring the real plan." She smiled for real this time. The reshuffle wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. No fanfare, no blast email, no LinkedIn post. Just a quiet Friday afternoon calendar invite titled Org Transparency and Future Ops Alignment, Working Session. Joe walked into Conference 4B carrying nothing but a yellow legal pad and a pen. Everyone else had laptops open, spreadsheets loaded, nervous glances at her like they were bracing for cuts. They were right, just not in the way they feared. She opened the session with one sentence. "This isn't a layoff call, it's a blueprint." Then she clicked the wall display to life. Slide 1, what we keep, what we change, what we build. The presentation wasn't long. It didn't need to be. She outlined a streamlined reporting structure, fewer bottlenecks, more autonomy. Roles weren't being eliminated, they were being unburied. No more dead-end titles, no more invisible ceilings, Joe said. If you've been doing the work, you'll have the authority. If you've been overlooked, we'll change the lens. Eyes widened. People leaned forward instead of back. And in the middle of slide 6, Joe paused. "Effective Monday," she said. Danica Ruiz will lead the DevOps coordination pod. A few heads turned toward Danica. She didn't react. Not outwardly. Just sat still, blinking once, a flush rising to her cheeks as Joe continued like nothing had shifted. Her name won't go in a press release. She won't post about it. But if you have a question, she'll have an answer. And it will be right. No one clapped. No one needed to. Later that day, Joe walked the floor with HR. The real HR. Not the limp compliance echo chamber Tara left behind. At her side was Jessica Avery, the new director. Not new to Joe. She'd recommended her for a role last year, but Elliot had passed her over in favor of someone more seasoned. Now Jessica held the badge, the budget, and a mission. Joe opened a shared dashboard on her tablet and scrolled to the mentorship initiative. Start here, she said. No more annual feedback cycles, monthly peer reviews, one-on-one shadows, and a cross-department buddy system. I want every junior staffer with a name and a voice before Q3. Jessica nodded. And the senior team? Joe didn't look up. They can either mentor or move. By Monday, the new structure was live. Joe didn't micromanage the rollout. She just watched. Measured the shift. Felt the tension slip from the edges of the bullpen. Even Elliot noticed. He'd been showing up to fewer team meetings, avoiding eye contact, avoiding Joe. But on Tuesday, he appeared outside her office, hovering. She glanced up. Something on your calendar? He stepped inside, unsure. I heard about the board's directive. Joe nodded. Twice monthly reviews. Performance metrics due by the 15th and end of month. Layla will be your primary. I don't report to Layla, he said, though his voice betrayed he wasn't sure. You do now. Elliot stood there, hollow, not defiant. Just off balance. Like a man still looking for the edge of the cliff he already fell from. Anything else? Joe asked, already glancing at her screen. He didn't answer, just left. Later that night, she checked the internal shareholder ledger. Mila's name still sat on it, barely. One entry, a 0.5% holding. But next to it, a tag. Pending divestment, private buyout in process. Joe stared at the line for a moment, then hit refresh. Gone. Mila had sold out. Quietly, completely. Just like Joe knew she would once the oxygen got thin. She shut the screen and poured a glass of wine, looking out her window across the Chicago skyline. Not triumphant, not relieved, just ready. Her phone buzzed once, a Slack DM. From someone she hadn't expected. Angela Lynn. Board wants a proposal by EOD Friday. Succession strategy. Think carefully. The conference room on 18 was booked under a different name. Internal audit debrief. Attendance required. No one questioned it. Not even Elliot. Joe arrived first. Black suit, low ponytail, binder in hand. She greeted no one. Took the seat at the center. Angela Lynn sat at the head. Reggie beside her, calm as ever. Layla was already scanning through the packet Joe had circulated earlier that morning. Elliot walked in 5 minutes late. No apology. Still trying to hold on to the ghost of the role he no longer owned. He smiled at the room like nothing was wrong. But his tie was crooked, and his eyes darted too quickly to the empty chair at the far end. No Mila this time. Not even a call-in. Angela cleared her throat. Let's get started. Joe, the floor's yours. Joe opened the binder. Thank you. She didn't posture, didn't rehearse. She read from the facts. Over the last 3 quarters, the COO's office has overseen 3 failed restructuring proposals, 2 HR attrition spikes, and 1 documented breach of shareholder protections. She clicked the first slide onto the screen. Case file. Misuse of executive access. May 10th source, internal legal and IT security slide. 2. Ignored ethics reports. 4 uninvestigated complaints filed against COO's office slide. 3. Performance Delta, Strategic Ops KPIs versus Actual, Q1, Q3. Each slide landed like a quiet gavel. Joe's voice never rose, it didn't need to. "This isn't about vengeance," she said finally. "It's about standard." She closed the binder. "I'm requesting a formal vote for the removal of Elliot Crane as Chief Operating Officer, effective immediately." Silence followed, not stunned, just waiting. Like everyone already knew how this would go. Angela turned to the others. Board vote. Removal of current COO under Clause 6.1.4. Malcolm was first. Aye. Layla. Aye. Reggie. Aye. Angela. Aye. Elliot's eyes moved to each one like he couldn't quite believe they'd said it out loud. He leaned forward. "You're basing this on incomplete data. The ethics complaints. Half of those were anonymous. Anyone can write a report." Joe stared at him. "And yet, you didn't investigate any?" He opened his mouth. Closed it. Angela looked down at her notes. "Elliot, please step outside. Security will walk you down." "I'm not," he started, then stopped. The door opened before he could say anything else. Two men in gray suits waited outside, quiet, unarmed, unbothered. Elliot stood, looked at Joe. Not furious, just emptied. He said nothing. And that said everything. The door closed behind him. A long silence settled across the room. Then Angela turned to Joe. "The board would like to extend an offer." Joe didn't blink. Angela continued, voice even. "We've reviewed your leadership across the last 3 quarters, your strategic performance, your crisis management, your judgment. It's unanimous. We're offering you the COO seat." Layla nodded once. Reggie leaned back, eyes on her. Joe exhaled, slow and quiet. She glanced down at her binder, then at the window behind Angela where the skyline lit the edges of the glass. It was everything she'd been working toward. The control, the clarity, the command. And it wasn't enough. She looked back at the room. "No." Angela blinked. "Excuse me?" Joe straightened. "I'm declining the role." A beat. Layla narrowed her eyes. "Why?" Joe looked at each of them in turn. "Because I don't want to fix what's broken from the inside. I want to shape what comes next." She opened the binder again and flipped to the back. One final page. She slid it across the table to Angela. "Instead, I'm requesting a board seat." Angela read it. Her face didn't move. "But Reggie?" He smiled. Joe continued, calm and clear. "Permanent, voting, not interim. I want the seat Mila thought she owned." Silence thickened the air. Layla nodded slowly. "You want power without title." Joe smiled faintly. "No, I want impact without permission." Angela leaned back. "You'll need full board approval." Joe nodded. "Then I'll earn it. But let's be honest." She stood gathering her binder. "I already have." Joe sat at the far end of the boardroom table now. The view behind her, Lake Michigan, slick and endless, wasn't just decorative. It was a message. Her nameplate read, "Joanna Barrett, Board Director, Strategic Oversight. No acting. No interim. Just the weight of permanence." The board had voted 4-1 to confirm her seat by the following Friday. The lone dissent was a minor shareholder proxy who didn't show up to the vote. Joe didn't mind. She never needed everyone, just enough. Angela slid a folder across the table. Greg's finalized the paperwork. Joe opened it. Inside, ownership schedule. Update, Class B shares, amended, voting rights, active. Seat class, permanent. Greg, seated quietly at the edge of the room, gave her a single nod. No words, just finality. Reggie leaned back, folding his arms. "Told you they wouldn't see it coming." Joe didn't smile, but her fingers pressed lightly into the corner of the folder. Ownership made physical. 2 hours later, she walked out of the boardroom and into a glass-walled micro-conference room labeled ComOps Alpha. Her team was already waiting, some still in soft disbelief. Joe pulled up a slide deck. The title screen was blank. Just white text on gray. No more whispers. "This is our new communication system," she said, "and our new policy." She clicked to the next slide. A flowchart outlining shareholder updates, internal comms, and frontline transparency protocols. No more late-night leaks. No more department silos. No more secret votes disguised as reorgs. Every shareholder, regardless of stake, will receive quarterly impact summaries. And for internal staff? She pointed. Open reporting lines, anonymous flagging tools, and direct access to governance materials. Someone near the back exhaled. It sounded like a release. Danica raised her hand. "And exec-level promotions?" Joe nodded. "Merit-based. Starting now." She clicked again. Next slide, Equity Advancement Pilot. Internal only. 3% option pool reserved quarterly nomination windows review panel. Cross-functional, peer-vetted. Danica blinked. "That's huge." Joe met her eyes. "That's overdue." Over the next week, she spent her mornings in meetings, her afternoons in review cycles, and her nights staring at the skyline, redrafting the bones of a company that had spent a decade polishing its reflection instead of its foundation. She promoted 3 internal candidates. None of them had Ivy League resumes. All of them had receipts. One was a night shift QA lead. One was a UX researcher who hadn't had a direct manager in 6 months. The last? A soft-spoken developer who had rewritten 40% of the platform's code without ever being listed in the release notes. Joe handed them each a quiet envelope with updated titles, comp adjustments, and a line at the bottom. "This isn't a favor. It's what you earned." The next all-hands meeting opened with standing room only, not because people were required, because they wanted to see if it was real. Joe didn't lead with a mission statement. She led with numbers. Attrition down 13% in 6 weeks. Client net promoter score up 9 points. Internal escalation complaints cut in half. Then she clicked to a final slide. A photo. It wasn't posed. It was taken by Danica, one of those blurry, mid-laugh moments where Joe stood at a desk talking with a junior team in sneakers and rolled sleeves. Underneath it, one line in all caps. "Ownership isn't a title, it's a receipt." When she closed the deck, no one clapped. Not out of apathy, but because the silence meant they believed it. Back in her office, Joe poured herself a cup of coffee and opened her laptop. A new message sat at the top of her inbox. From Angela Lynn, subject, forward planning, Q4 and beyond. "Joe, let's talk next steps. I assume you have something bigger in mind. I'd like to see it." Joe opened her notes app and typed a single heading. "The future, they can't steal." She was halfway through writing when a knock hit her door. Reggie stepped in, holding 2 glasses and a bottle of Barolo. "We still celebrating, or did I miss the revolution?" Joe gestured to the second chair. "Sit. You'll want to see this next part." Joe stared at the message. The name flashed across her screen like a ghost still trying to haunt the living. M. Crane, subject. "We should talk." No attachment, no apology, no signature, just a subjectless whisper from the wreckage. Joe clicked the options menu, selected delete, didn't archive, didn't reply, just erased it. She leaned back in her chair and pulled up the dashboard labeled Company Roadmap, Q4 Q1 Strategic Pivot. The doc wasn't color-coded by department. It wasn't built around siloed KPIs or top-down mandates. It was sharp, lateral, clean. Her fingerprints were all over it. Fewer meetings, more execution, clearer ownership, no more whisper chains disguised as strategy. She scrolled through the last 2 pages, stopping at the footer she had rewritten herself. "Accountability is not a quarterly goal, it's our operating system." A soft knock broke the silence. Danica stepped in, holding a crisp manila folder. Her expression was different today, not uncertain or cautious. It was steady. She held the folder out like it mattered. Final draft. Bonus structures ready. Joe took it, flipped through. Tiered incentives, stretch goals, peer-nominated recognition tied to execution metrics, not charisma. There was a sticky note on the last page. Danica's handwriting. Joe, you said build what we needed. This is what I needed. Joe closed the folder. Good work. Danica hesitated. You staying late? Joe gestured at her desk. Not as late as I used to. Danica nodded, smiled, and left the room. Joe turned back toward the city. The skyline looked different now. Same glass, same spires. But the shadows had shifted. The company wasn't lighter. It was heavier in the best way. Stronger. Cleaner. Real. Her name wasn't on every wall. But her intent was in every corner. She opened her internal dashboard one last time, clicked into internal memo portal. Q3 final entry. She typed. 2. All staff, we did not survive this quarter by chance. We built it. You built it. Your work isn't invisible. It's foundational. This company is not the sum of its systems. It's the sum of its people. See you in Q4. Joe. She clicked File and Distribute, closed the window. Behind her, Reggie knocked once, then pushed open the door. Just saw the memo, he said, raising an eyebrow. Emotional without being sappy. Your signature style. Joe smirked. Coming from the man who once ended a company-wide note with a dad joke. He grinned. Hey, morale was down. I stand by the pun. He held up a small velvet envelope. By the way, board dinner's tonight. They pushed it up. Angela said, You're hosting. Joe raised an eyebrow. Did I agree to that? You didn't, Reggie said, tossing the envelope on her desk, but the universe did. She exhaled, reached for her blazer, and flicked the office lights off behind her. Reggie paused at the door. You've come a long way from getting accidentally dropped from calendar invites. Joe locked her screen. Yeah, she said. Then, with a dry smile and zero theatrics. They forced me out of the room, so I bought the building.